are wanting to be responsive to a number of different things that we've heard. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the steps that we've taken. And if they don't work, we can always pivot back. There are other things that we are in the process of looking to implement. For those of you, I think by this point, my name is Michael Weinberg. I am with California Forward. And so we've got a really important presentation today on the nuts and bolts of the county economy. And I wanted to start by sort of reviewing the ways in which we're trying to be responsive to the things that we've heard from this group. The first thing is that we've heard from a number of you that you want to make sure that you understand, we've been seeing this great research, but how is this research being used in the process? Dr. Walrod is going to be providing some remarks to make sure that people understand that context and how this research is a part of the process. We then have heard from folks that they want easier ways to communicate and have their voices heard. And so we are, everyone has probably noticed, in a Zoom webinar instead of a regular Zoom. So what that means is that we're able to use a Q&A function in addition to the chat. Per usual, if folks could introduce themselves in the chat and make sure that the chat in this case is sent to, set up to send to everyone, that would be great. But what this means is that we don't all appear on screen, all 80 of us or whatever it is, at the same time. When you do, raise your hand, we will promote you to the screen and to a panelist to be able to ask that question. We totally understand that, that is not the same as kind of having everybody on the screen. So we'll, kind of get folks' feedback in terms of whether this version of the Zoom webinar worked well. And if it doesn't, we can always pivot. Another feature that I wanted to point out is that OCBC has invested in closed captioning for this and all the other webinars. So if you go to show captions on the bottom of your screen, you will have the ability to translate the remarks into a vast number of languages. So very interested in folks' feedback on that function to the extent that we try it out. And it's going to be extremely important as we continue to diversify this group, bring on different community members to have that accessibility. And then we're actually going to open up the space for a broader conversation on the process of doing all this and doing a lot of it online. So that is something that will be coming up after Dr. Kleinhenz's presentation. And then we'll be able to bleed over into our research deep dive if we need some more of that time. And I'm setting my speaking language. Cool feature. And then finally, these meetings have already effectively been extended to 90 minutes because we've been doing these research deep dives. But one of the things that we've heard from you folks is that, you do want, more time for interaction. So at the next meeting, we're going to be bringing back more of a formal decision point around formally extending these meetings to 90 minutes. So welcome to the wonderful world of Zoom. We've lived a lot of our lives here over the course of a few years, but we're still trying to, figure out how to get these online meetings right. So again, trying some things out today, and we'll continue to be responsive to feedback and adapt as necessary. So with that, I'm going to move us into the public comment portion of the agenda. And just to reiterate something, these public comments are really intended to be remarks of under a minute of folks that are not on the High Road Transition Collaborative to allow the broader public to participate in this meeting if they so choose. So if you are not an HRTC member and do want to provide public comment, I would invite you to raise your hand at this time, and the OCBC team will let me know if we have any hands raised.
None currently, Micah. No one provided me an email saying that they would comment. So we can just probably give it 30 more seconds. If no one raises their hand, we could proceed with the next agenda item.
Okay, great. That sounds good.
Okay, seeing none, Mike, I think we can proceed.
All right, cool. Thanks, Jesse. Well, we have, as we've been discussing the last few meetings, really coming to, with the exception of the, folks directly from the disinvested communities that we are in the process of working into the process, really finalizing the last, few folks that we want to add to the Hyde Road Transition Collaborative. And so we have one more from you. One of the areas that we collectively identified was, the area of environment and conservation. And so just one more proposed addition today. Melanie Schlotterbeck from the Banning Ranch Conservancy. Turn it back over to the OCBC folks in terms of how we want to manage the voting on this, given the new sort of Zoom webinar format. And then I also want to say that we've had a request for the new HRTC members that weren't able to attend our in-person meeting to have some time to introduce themselves. I don't believe that Melanie is here with us today, but that is something that we're going to want to implement in the future. So Jesse, how do we want to do the voting for this?
Yeah, so if people are willing to kind of raise their hand for that first and second, I can allow them to make that motion, and then I'm sure we could utilize the chat. Actually, I will utilize a survey function for people then to vote yay or nay.
Perfect. All right, so
make a motion here.
Yeah, this is Krista. I make a motion to approve.
Perfect. Do we have a second?
Good. Gloria?
Yes, I second the motion.
Fantastic. Any discussion?
Tracy, let me take you off.
I believe that's probably Tony again, if I remember.
Tony, sorry, yes, Tony, yes.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm not really quite sure why it keeps coming up, Tracy. Can we please get a breakdown? I don't have a problem with voting on this particular item, but I do think the context of how many people or how many organizations we have per group, because we did want to make sure that groups that represent disadvantaged communities have a certain percentage, and I am not quite sure where we're at.
Yeah, so we can bring that up, Tony. I think the individuals are on that HRTC list in the shared folder. I guess I will make sure to email it in every email to access that, where it has the individuals.
Oh no, I have looked. I just don't know off the top of my head, and
okay.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I should have checked before the meeting, but I don't know where we're.
Yeah,
I see the categories. What I don't understand is what's the definition that we're using so that we can figure out the 60 and 65%.
Yeah. So with this one was just an acknowledgement. Of course, this is an environmentalist, the definition is environmental justice, right? But we have an environmental group here because that's underrepresented. And then we are in the process of kind of through our CBOs recruiting the individuals of disinvested communities. And then of the others, if you look, there's a lot of CBOs who I'd say they self-identify as disinvested communities, And that's one of the surveys we've launched as well. And then that's, I think, in the second tab of the self-identification. So you could really see how people consider themselves CBOs or disinvested communities or business associations, whatever the categories are.
So
I would
is-
look to
So
both
is
of
the
those.
category, the individual members of disinvested communities by definition, not as human beings, and then there is a category of organizations that serve disinvested communities. And that's where, and in order to get to 65%, then are we able to see that? Or are we seeing organizations that I think it's a really powerful idea that more than a majority are going to be either individuals or groups that serve individuals that are in the definition. And I just want to make sure that we're tracking that in a really respectful way. And I know that there's a lot of great activity going on. I'm just not connecting those two dots for me.
Yes, so I think that's a great point, and that we can for the next agenda, we can really break that down. But you're correct in the summary of, we have a lot of organizations that support disinvested communities, but we also want actual individuals from disinvested communities, and that's how we have made that distinction in the SFP. So it's not, so some of the groups that, although support disinvested communities, are in other categories, are in CBO categories, are in even certain business groups, right? The group you're representing, Hispanic Chamber, they're supporting a lot of disinvested communities, or at least underrepresented and underinvested communities. So I think you're right. We can definitely build out a matrix and present it to the group to make it a lot easier to understand who's in what category.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tony. So we'll bring that back to folks. So Jesse, do we want to put up the survey function?
Let's see, sorry, and
I'll wait to get the official word, and then we'll move into some more research presentations here in this research phase of the project.
so some are still populating. We'll give it one more minute.
Cool. Thanks, Jesse.
Actually, while we're waiting, we do have another question. I think someone needs to raise their hand. I'm not quite sure if it was for the motion or they didn't lower it, but from, yeah, so it says Santa Ana work.
Yes, hello, this is Deborah.
Hi, Deborah, yeah, you had your hand raised, so did you have a
Oh,
question?
no, I'm sorry, I was trying to second the motion.
Oh,
so-
wonderful. Okay, just making sure.
All right, we got a third then.
Yeah, good job, Deborah.
I think we can end the poll since there's a kind of overwhelming. Can people see that? So, Mike,
Yep.
can you see the, okay, just
Okay,
the motion approved.
motion approved. All right. So at this point, I want to hand it over to Dr. Wallace Walrod, who is going to be providing a little bit more context. We've been getting all kinds of amazing research on the environment of Orange County, mapping disinvested communities. Today, we're going to be hearing a lot about sort of the industries and industry clusters and broader economic statistics. And Dr. Walrod is going to provide us some context about how does that get used in this broader SURF process. Over to you.
Thank you, Micah. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. We thought it was a good time to take a couple minutes before Dr. Kleinhens presents to just talk about our research approach and strategy, which is very simple, actually. We're sticking very, very closely to the state guidelines that are outlined in the SURF SFP, and also in our proposal and our project plan. So just as a reminder, I'm sure you've read this, but the overarching frameworks for SURF are a lens of equity, sustainability, job quality and access, and economic competitiveness and resilience. So we've started to do some of those presentations so far. That all rolls up to the regional plan part 1. And the components of that, per the state guidelines, are stakeholder mapping, which is underway, and you'll hear about that in a month or so. The regional summary, labor market analysis, and industry cluster analysis, which is what you'll hear from Dr. Kleinhans today. And then a SWOT analysis, which you'll hear about at the next HRTC meeting. The very, very tight timeline due to the delays in the state getting SURF started. So we have a lot of work to do in a very short amount of time. So our approach has been to have the people who are going to be writing the analysis and providing the data do a PowerPoint presentation first so that you can review, say, oh, we need more information on this, dive a little deeper on this, we'll get that feedback. Then we'll start doing the narrative write-up. That will be the draft of the report. And then you'll have multiple opportunities, HRTC, to review and provide us feedback, several different drafts before we finalize that. The other thing that we are doing is standing up a hub, Esri Hub data portal, which is where all the data and maps will be resident. We will actually get a demo of that in the extra time today from Esri. And I just want to emphasize that, you know, we are incorporating all the questions that we've been getting, all the feedback as we go along. So these meetings are crucial to do that, but we're always available to do that, you know, during other times as well, one-on-one or as groups. And I did want to just put into the chat an example of a report that we do every year that touches on a lot of these issues. And that's our community indicators report that we have done every year since 1999, so almost 25 years now. That covers a wide variety of the topics that we've been talking about and that are a fundamental part of SURF. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Micah. Just wanted to give a little bit of a, verbalize what our research approach has been, is, and will be. And I just want to emphasize, once again, sticking very close to what the state tells us should be a part of SURF, and very tight timelines in order to accomplish our mission here. So I think we've assembled a fantastic research team, and Dr. Kleinhans, who I've worked with for a number of years, former Cal State Fullerton professor, so understands Orange County very deeply, is a good example of our research team. So back over to you, Micah.
Great. Thank you so much. I hope everybody is ready on their Friday morning to see a lot of charts because Dr. Kleinhans brought a lot. So we're going to be, diving into a lot of the, kind of conventional economic analysis data. And there's a lot of it. So without further ado, I will pass it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Micah. Thanks to the OCBC and to Charitable Ventures for leading the charge here. Thanks, Micah, and others who are who coordinated this meeting today. So I have a lot to talk about because we have a very powerful Orange County economy that we all need to understand. And so I've been asked to present the socioeconomic profile of Orange County's economy. I'll talk about the industries, the industry clusters, the workforce, a little bit about the demographics at a somewhat high level, all of which, of course, feeds into the sort of data-driven decision-making that I hope will come out of the whole SURF process. We're really in a very fortunate period of time where the level of data, the detail that's available, not just at the county level, but below the county level, has never been better. And then the tools that we have to analyze it, such as Esri and so on, have also never been better. So I'm looking forward to seeing the final product of this full research effort. I've been given 25 minutes, and if you've taken a quick look at my slides, you'll see that I have quite a number. So I'm going to get going. I may stop at a couple of points to see if there are some questions. I can't see the Q&A during the course of my remarks. So I may stop. And then if Micah, if you see anything that you is a pressing question, just ask me to stop and I'll take it. So let's
Fantastic.
begin.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we also
Yeah.
have the time in the deep dive after the to go further into it. So
Correct.
keep going.
And so my plan is to maybe take one or two questions at a couple of points where I stop, and then leave the rest for the deep dive that comes later. Just some high level numbers to kick this off. Orange County is a large, prosperous region, 3.2 million in population, the third largest county in California, also the third largest in terms of household employment. So these are the people who live, these are the workers who live in Orange County, whether they work in Orange County or not. The non-farm job numbers refer to payroll or wage and salary jobs that people have here in Orange County, whether they live in Orange County or not. So there's more on that a little bit later on. The unemployment rate matches that of the United States at 3.4%. It's typically among the lowest in California, currently the fifth lowest. So that's always been one of the amazing features of Orange County's economy. Its personal income on a per capita basis is an overall gauge of economic well-being, and with $81,000, that's the ninth highest in California. So certainly a one measure of well-being Orange County shows strongly. The median household income is 18% higher than California's as a whole at $100,000 plus. Okay, so give me a second because I'm having some, there we go. And it's a diverse community. Now, we're going to come back to some of these slides in a little bit, but the point is that whereas Orange County is often stereotyped as being predominantly a white county, that is not the case, has not been the case for quite some time. As of 2021, about just under 40% of the population considers itself to be white. You've got a significant Hispanic or Latino share, his significant Asian share, as well as other ethnicities and communities represented as well. We're going to be looking at in greater detail at the industries that make up Orange County's economy, but just a quick look. I just want to point out that there's some significant regional strengths. This is where Orange County gets its economic strength, is its ability to grow from medical devices industry, information technology, business services, and financial services, as well as, of course, the well-known hospitality and tourism sector of the economy. These are the pillars of the economy that help it grow. There are other local services and industries that give Orange County and its communities the character and the amenities that they have. And so a few of those are shown here, okay? Now, as good as the picture might be that I have just painted, the fact of the matter is that we still have a county with several challenges. The median price in this Orange County housing market, as we all know, is among the highest in California and the nation. That means that affordability is among the lowest in California. Nationally, it's the lowest here in Southern California. Rents are also among the highest in the California economy as well as nationally. The rent burden is high. 56% of renters spend at least 30% of income on rent. Poverty, 9.9% based on the U.S. Department of Commerce readings, 13th lowest among the counties in California. So that's a quick snapshot of the Orange County economy. We're going to do a deeper dive right now. So let's take a look at the economy and its industries. So I talked a little bit about the employment numbers. So here you've got a couple of numbers to look at. One is the labor force. These are the number of people 16 years and older who are in the labor force in Orange County. So that's 1.6 million. Of that, 1.55 million are working. So that's household employment. These are people who live in Orange County and have a job either in Orange County or somewhere else, including working at home. Okay, and here's the number of unemployed down there, 55,000. But so that was 1.55 million working Orange County residents. Here's the number of wage and salary jobs at Orange County establishments, 1.69 million. And you see the importance of the various industries to the local economy as you look down this column labeled February 2023. So the largest of the sectors in the economy in terms of employment include healthcare and social assistance. We also have down at the bottom, administrative support, construction, accommodation and food services, which together with arts and recreation often makes up what we call leisure and hospitality. And together that would also be among the largest of the sectors of the local economy. Just about every sector of the economy added jobs in year-over-year terms. That's what you see in this year-over-year change column. 2.7% gain for Orange County's job count in 2022 is about half of the job gain that we saw for all of California. The percentage gain for all of California was 5.1%. This last column shows us the recovery of each of these individual industries from the pandemic. So February 2020 was the benchmark against which we gauge whether or not we've recovered all the jobs that were lost during the pandemic. The region as a whole has just barely done so. Some of these that are in bold have more than recovered the job losses, and then we have a number of industries that are in the process of recovering the lost jobs. I'm going to skip over this in the interest of time, but basically this graph, if you have a chance to look at it, shows the time frame. I should say the timeline over which various industries have grown or not in the Orange County economy. So we often think about the economy in terms of jobs, but it's also important to think of the regional economy in terms of what we produce and how much we produce. So this is gross regional product for Orange County. It's inflation adjusted. And so we have about a $250 billion economy in Orange County, among the largest in the nation. The economy grew very large by quite a bit in 2021 as it recovered from the pandemic. This data comes in with a bit of a lag, so we only have numbers through 2021. But the fact is that it's one of the largest economies in California based on gross regional product. Now take a look at the next slide. Again, we typically think of the economy or the economic composition of a region in terms of jobs. And that's what you have with these orange bars. That's the percentage of total employment for each of these industries. Healthcare and social assistance accounts for the largest percentage at about 12%. But when you take a look at healthcare and social assistance in terms of its contribution to output, it's a little over 6%. Okay, so this is an important distinction. We have certain industries that make large contributions in terms of output, in terms of employment. And those are typically pretty well known. We've got healthcare and social assistance. We have accommodation and food services. A little bit further down, we have arts and recreation, again, which together make up leisure and hospitality. But what we do not want to overlook is the fact that things like manufacturing make large contributions to the total output or economic activity that is produced in the regional economy, as does real estate and information. So this distinction, or I should say, it's this combination of indicators gives us a better sense of which industries are really contributing to the local economy, not just in terms of jobs, but in terms of economic activity. I had this slide up earlier and pointed out that medical devices, information technology, business services, financial services, and hospitality and tourism over here on the right-hand side are some of the heavy hitters when it comes to the local economy. What do I mean by industry clusters? Well, industries, there are hundreds of industries in the local economy. Some industries have very strong linkages to other industries. And so we identify those and we organize the industry data around those industry clusters. So it's not just the pharmaceutical, or I should say the medical devices industry, the manufacturing portion, but all of the other allied industries that are related, that are closely related to medical devices, similarly for these other industries. And so when we take a look at those industry clusters, we really get a much better idea of the composition of the local economy, where its strengths are, and so on. Moving forward then, it's just a good idea for us to identify the traded industries versus the local industries. And not everybody works with this terminology, so I thought I'd add a little bit of information, just some very commonplace kinds of descriptions. Traded industries basically produce goods and services that have markets that extend beyond the county. They are the source of economic growth for the local economy. So they expand the economic pie. Local industries generally produce goods and services that serve the Orange County market. The customers of the Orange County residents. Many of these industries give Orange County economy communities their identity through the array of services and amenities that they provide. So local industries typically account for larger job counts than the traded industries. The traded industries are the engine of growth in the local economy. Let me just take a quick moment to stop and see, Micah, are there any questions in the chat that I may want to take up at this point?
We've been answering some of the, yeah, we've been answering some of the questions in the chat. So I think that we can
keep going.
Keep going.
Okay, good, because I see about half my time is up.
Oh,
so.
sorry, we do have one question.
Sure.
From Linda.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. Right, Linda, if you could then raise your hand so I can kind of see you or pop up, or or type it into the Q&A. There we go. Linda, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Real quickly, I noticed that there is a bit of a disconnect between healthcare, which appears to be a large employment number, and yet it doesn't show up on the industry clusters. Is there a rationale for that?
We have had to include a subset of some of these indicators. And so I'll have to double check on that, Linda, to see why it is not shown there. I think what we wanted to do was emphasize some of the traded industry clusters alongside the other industry clusters. It probably doesn't, is not among the highest ranked. There are several more industry clusters. We just had a selection of industry clusters in that particular slide. So we will go back and take a look to see where healthcare happens to be placed. My guess is that it's, in terms of its ranking as an industry cluster, it's probably not a whole lot higher than the typical ranking for the state as a whole and for other counties. So that may be why it didn't show up. So it has about the same percentage contribution to the local economy as it has in every other county economy, is what I'm saying. Okay. Okay, so I think I'm going to move along. Let's talk a little bit about the county workforce. We have an educated workforce in Orange County. If you take a look, and so here you've got some comparisons of the percentage of individuals over the age of 25 that have various levels of educational attainment. If you take a look at the blue bars, let's just, for the sake of simplicity, just add bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees together for Orange County. Over 40% have some college degree or higher level of education. By comparison, the state as a whole has about 36% falling into that category. We have about equal shares of people with associate's degree and some college, somewhat lower. So with the higher levels of educational attainment, bachelor's degree and above, it should be no surprise that when it comes to high school graduates and those with less education, it represents a smaller percentage of the total pie. I talked about this from the outset when I was giving you the overview, and I just want to point this out again. We are a net importer of workers. What do I mean by that? Well, again, that civilian employment, the number of people who, workers who reside in Orange County is about 1.55 million individuals. The total non-farm employment, though, is quite a bit higher, almost 1.7 million people. So basically, this gap between the gray line and the orange line represents the number of jobs that have to be filled by people who come into the county from elsewhere. Not to mention the fact that at least some of the people who are represented by the orange line actually leave Orange County and go work in other counties. So my point is that we do have a vibrant economy, and it is fueled in part by workers who come into the county from elsewhere for any number of reasons. And so as we look at economic resilience, we have to recognize that it is not just a county issue, but really, in a manner of speaking, it's also a regional issue that I think we're all aware of. So let's keep going here. Now, as the pandemic hit us in 2020, the share of people working from home escalated to not just in Orange County to roughly 20%, but also for all of California. So huge change there. The question is, how is this going to play out over the next few years? We also have obtained information from the EDD on occupational employment and wages. So everything that you've seen up to this point had to do with industries and industry clusters. But now we're going to turn our attention to data from a different set of data that tells us about the workers in Orange County. And so this is a very typical breakdown of the occupations. These are major occupational groups. There are some 700 plus individual occupations that we would find in Orange County if we looked at it on an occupation by occupation level. But the mix of occupational groups for the county doesn't differ a whole lot from California as a whole, which appears here in blue as a basis for comparison. Somewhat higher shares of office and administrative, support, manufacturing, I should say sales and related, food preparation and serving related. We have a high level of services. We have leisure and hospitality with the significant tourism and hospitality segment of the local economy. So I don't think there are any surprises here. Our goal is going to be to identify some of the detailed occupations as well that probably require further attention. And down here at the bottom, you can see the total occupational employment for Orange County is about 1.8 million persons. In terms of wages, first off, looking at the box here, the mean average occupational wage for Orange County is about $67,000, almost $68,000, a little bit less than the state as a whole. You've got different types of occupations and the wages that are shown here, management at the 100,000 mark, a number of industry or occupations that that pay in the neighborhood of $90,000 to $100,000. All the way at the bottom, we see here that food preparation and service related pays about $30,000. These are not full-time equivalent wages. These are the wages based on actual data of wages paid to workers in Orange County for the year 2022. So you can see we've got quite a range of wages. And keep in mind, these are wage numbers based on occupations. When we look at average wages by industry, not that I've introduced that, but if we were to look at average wages by industry, that would include the CEO as well as the janitor. And so you get a lot of noise in average wage by industry information. You get a clearer picture of who's making how much when you look at occupational wages. Now we're going to take a look at county demographics. First off, the total population for Orange County. It peaked in 2020. Actually, it hit a plateau in the late teens, not unlike many other communities here in Southern California. So around 2017, 2018, many counties and individual cities around the region hit a peak and plateaued just prior to the pandemic. And then we saw a slide in population here in Orange County in the couple of years since the pandemic began. I would not be surprised to see this turn around as we move into the next couple of years. If we take a quick look at the sources of change in Orange County's population, I direct your attention to the two columns in the middle, because the sum total of these two columns tell us about what's happening, what the change in population is for Orange County. And so we have, if we go from 2010 all the way to 2014-15, both of these were contributing to population growth. We have positive numbers up to that point. Net migration from 2015-16 forward As you can see, it turned negative. We're not necessarily talking about people leaving the state of California, more likely moving from Orange County to adjacent counties like Riverside, San Bernardino, perhaps to San Diego County. But what happened as we moved further down here just prior to the pandemic was that the number of people leaving the county due to net migration exceeded the natural increase, which is the births minus the deaths over here on the left-hand side. And over the succeeding years, we saw that net migration accelerated, not unlike many other coastal counties in the state of California. So I expect this is going to be turning around. Not that we're in the business of forecasting demographics as a part of this project. This will likely turn around, and then the natural increase will likely turn around in the next couple of years. There's a lot of data there. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to go into greater depth, but let's take a look next at the ethnic and racial composition of Orange County. And as I said before, I think a lot of people believe or have the perception that it is predominantly a white county. That has not been the case for at least a few decades, a couple decades or more. And it is certainly not the case right now. As of 2021, about 38% were white, 34% Hispanic or Latino. Asians accounted for about 22%. We have some of the other percentage that are represented here. The average age of Orange County residents has been on the rise. So back in 2010, it was 36 years. It's currently at 39 years. This is a graph that I think we really should all pay attention to because it represents a couple of challenges that the county as well as the state face over the next decade or so. Over here on the left-hand side, the State Department of Finance has projected that we will at some point resume population growth in Orange County. We expect to see population growth through the year 2035. So that's just about a dozen years away. But the mix of population in terms of age groups really is going to change our workforce. We're going to be seeing a decline in the number of people who are of prime working age. That's people between the ages of 25 and 64. We're also going to see an increase in the number of people who enter retirement, leaving the labor force. So that's the black line down here. And the real challenge is that, especially from about the middle of this decade going forward, the number of people leaving the labor force is going to exceed the number of people coming into the labor force from the 18 to 24 age group. So we're going to have a labor force gap, and it's going to be compounded by the fact that this is an expensive county in which to live, whether you own or you rent. So in order to address this issue, which is to ensure that this vibrant economy we have continues to grow at its potential, we're going to have to ensure that it has a sufficient number of workers. We've already seen that it already imports a significant number of workers at this time. But in order to continue to grow, we're going to have to address the other gap, which is housing. So let's talk a little bit about that, and I'll be wrapping up in the next minute or so. Median price in Orange County in excess of $1 million. That's been the case for quite some time. No surprise there. It's quite a bit higher than the US as a whole. Sorry, quite a bit higher than California as a whole. And just for reference, you know, the US median price is about half the California median. So Orange County's median price is well above that of the nation as a whole. You get a sense of that looking at the affordability. This is the percentage of people, households that can afford the median priced home. For Orange County in the most recent quarter, it's about 12 or 13% over here on the far right-hand side. Somewhat worse than California as a whole, which is also fairly low, certainly in comparison to the US as a whole, where affordability, not great, but it's still, it's 38%. So rents are also high by any measure of comparison. So we've got an average rent of $3,000 for Orange County compared to $2,000 for the US as a whole. The housing stock, which is this blue line here, has typically grown over time. So you would think, okay, not so bad. And the mix of housing has largely been single family detached, as well as some additional single family attached. We've got the multifamily over here on the right-hand side. But let's take a look at some of these other numbers, because I think this is that challenge, the housing gap that accompanies the labor force gap that I mentioned a moment ago. This graph shows the total number of housing permitted units for the county going back to 2010, never exceeding 12,000 units. This box over here tells us that Orange County, based on SCAG numbers, has a housing need of about 184,000 units, or about 18,000 per year. So you can see that even though the county needs about 18,000 additional housing units per year to mitigate price increases, overcrowding, rent burdens, and so on, it's not coming anywhere close to meeting this housing number. So that's a huge challenge for the county going forward. And so there's more to be said about that. Let's see, I got to wrap up. I mentioned this at the beginning. The most general measure of economic well-being is per capita income. Orange County fares relatively well in comparison to LA, our neighbor, as well as California. The median household income for Orange County is about $100,000. That's somewhat higher than California as a whole, has been for quite some time. There's a high correlation between income and educational attainment. I think we all know that. And that's what this graph shows. It shows that when you compare the person who has less than a high school degree with the person who has a graduate or professional degree, that person with a graduate or professional degree makes about 3 times that person who does not have a high school degree. That's a huge challenge for us as we go forward, not just in Orange County, but throughout California. We also show here the household income by ethnicity, above average for whites and Asians, below average for Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, and Pacific Islanders. Poverty rates, it's the other way around. We've got higher poverty rates among Blacks, Native Americans, and Pacific Islanders. The average is over here on the far right-hand side at 12.3%, at 9.9% for the county of Orange. Housing burden, just wrapping up here, I already mentioned this, better than 50% of renters have a housing burden. That is to say, they spend at least 30% of their income on rent. That's pretty much universally the case across all ethnicities and races here in Orange County. Just a couple more pointers before we wrap up. Mean commute time, not too bad for Orange County at 26 minutes. But again, we need to keep in mind that Orange County draws a number of commuters in from adjacent counties, and we need to bear that in mind as we look at Orange County's future. The percentage of people who are uninsured in Orange County is relatively low. We have a number of other indicators that we're working to build out. The pollution burden, which varies depending on the community you happen to live in, but it tends to be most severe or more severe for the inland communities. And then there are various measures of distress. There's a pure distress community index, and it shows that Orange County fares relatively well compared to some of the other neighboring counties here in Southern California. I know I've raced through some of these last slides, but I do want to step aside and enable the group to continue with the agenda items, and then we're going to have the deep dive starting around 9:30. Is that right, Micah?
Yeah, I mean, with the conversation about our HRTC process may extend a little bit beyond 9:30, but there are some really important questions in the chat that have been raised about, okay, so these are the kind of, raw number of jobs, but really how do we measure job quality? Not just things like higher wage jobs, but things like the resilience of jobs, its ability to withstand things like the pandemic, the climate friendliness of jobs, and so on. And we've had actually some presentations that have spoken to that, but I do want, so we'll come back to that. If you can stay with us for until 10, that's fantastic. So the next item on the agenda is for us to have a little bit of a conversation, more directly about this process, about sort of what we'd like to see going forward. And so I will turn it over to Jesse to let me know who has their hands raised in this process, and we will promote you to panelists so that you can make your remarks.
Yeah, so I was just say, if people use the raise hand function, Austin and Cesar, when we see your hand raised, we will obviously get your questions for the panelists or from the presenters right at 9:30. We'll start with that. But again, if people want to kind of chime in on the process so far, their feedback on what they've experienced, not just this meeting, but for the past 2 months now, this is where we'll be open to people. I mean, this is where I think people can discuss and we can have a conversation. There was a comment about getting a copy of the presentation. Is it all these presentations are in the board packet that's tied to the invite and is also in the shared drive that is shared with you. So please, if you can, please review these slide decks prior to, but you will always have things in advance. Okay, then so we'll just start going through people with their hand raised now. Go ahead. I think Linda, and then we'll go through the hand raised, the people who have their hand raised so far.
Yes, thank you so much for the comprehensiveness of the research. I did look at it before the presentation, and I'm curious about the disparity that you were showing between the highest salaries and the lowest salaries, 111,000 and 30,000 essentially. Now, that's not news to any of us that have worked in this area. And the industry clusters to which those lower wages are attached are not new. That's the core of the inequity. How do we compare within Southern California, within the Western US or the US as a whole? Are we better, worse? I'm just curious.
So I'm so sorry, Linda. Maybe we set up an agenda that was a little confusing, but we're going to be coming back to the questions for the presenter after we get through the conversation, for people to be able to provide comments on the HRTC process itself. So could I ask you to sit tight with that question for just a few minutes?
Oh yeah, forgive me, I must have missed that. Thank
No,
you.
well, we may not have made
That's
it.
quite all right.
So
Thank
sorry,
you.
yeah. Can people who just have a question of the presenters lower their hands, and we're going to get to it right at 9:30? But can we just, at least for those who have questions about the process so far, then please keep your hand raised, and then we will call on you. Just want to confirm. So let me. Okay, so I'll call on the people with their hand raised. So Anna, and then Austin is next.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the question. I have gotten the chance to email Jesse directly about this, and I'm glad to be sharing with the rest of you to hear other people's thoughts. I wanted to begin thinking, especially as we bring on the disinvested community members, how our meetings could be more engaging and inclusive. So there's a few thoughts that I had about, yeah, I noticed today's format, I see the benefits in being able to track questions and have answers. That was super helpful. But it does feel a lot less, it's a lot more impersonal and participatory. And I'm hoping we go in the other direction. So a few of the thoughts that I had was, I saw the welcome slide at the beginning. How do we get to know who's in the room? The introductions, maybe paired with like a check-in question. How are people doing? Or something related to a topic of the day, or just like, what's your favorite breakfast meal, or just things to be able to have a little bit more of getting to know each other as coalition members. And then more substantively, I talked about how we don't really have the chance to hear presentations on some of the decisions that we're making, like the draft, the draft plan that was submitted, or and so if there's the opportunity for a space to digest some of that in advance, in discussion, if there's a the ability to get those presentations in a separate meeting that's not the HRTC, because I know we don't have a lot of time here. And then the other point I was about, intentionally requesting input and participation from disinvested community members. I know Tony mentioned at the beginning how we're being intentional about the design of having majority participation of disinvested community members, and how do we make it a space where there's confidence to be able to speak up and participate. And so even just things like being able to say, can we hear from at least one disinvested community member on this topic before we take a vote? And then absolutely, I've heard from others chiming in on language justice. How do we, open up by saying people can participate in the language that they are most comfortable with, and there's multiple methods of, being able to hear and speak in the language that you require. Yeah, I would love to hear from others, but mine were mostly about like inclusivity, participation, and preparation for disinvested community members themselves. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Incredibly helpful. Appreciate it.
Got it. So Austin, and then we'll go to Kathy. So Austin, one moment. Go ahead, Austin. I think you're on.
Good morning. There's a gap in the in the cluster analysis that is, I don't think marginal. I think it's fundamental. There's no slides on unionization or the relationship between unionization and wages. And I mean, there was a more marginal. There was kind of a comment or suggestion that the gap is providing housing, which absolutely is, but there's also in wages. If we paid more to the cleaning and to the food service and to the and the other lower end classifications, there would be much less of a gap. And for instance, housekeepers in Los Angeles are making $25 an hour right now. Housekeepers in Orange County are making 20 or 18 or less. If they don't have any more education, they just have a union, and they're making $10,000 more a year. That closes the gap. And the cluster analysis didn't have any slides on that, which I think if we don't include that, then our options or our policy options become limited, because we don't recognize the obvious fact that paying more and unionization solves those problems. And I think that it's critical that we fix those omissions before using that cluster analysis or considering it complete.
Great, thanks, Austin. Again, we'll take that more as a commentary or maybe a question that we can return to with Dr. Kleinhens a little bit later on. And I'm seeing a variety. I mean, it's tough because we're trying to create certain functionality, and certain functionality is only available in particular Zoom formats. But we definitely want to be using best practices in terms of inclusivity. So we'll be getting back to folks on how we're going to try to solve that from a technological side. And thanks, Annette, for the recommendation of maybe a best practice from a group that we can take a look at for these meetings.
So we have Kathy Boyd. Kathy, I think you're on.
Thank you. So I just wanted to tilt a little, and my name is Kathy Boyd, and I'm heading the educational sector as a lead for our work around SURF and HRTC. And I haven't been able to speak up yet. I didn't speak up in the last meeting that we met on, but in the in-person meeting, I met several people, and it was very exciting. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the positivity of what's happening right now with this SURF movement and with the HRTC, and kind of bring back some of the energy that I had in our initial meeting, which was really fantastic. And for those of you who are not in the education sector, I do want to outline as well what's happening is we have some other movements happening in the education sector. One specifically called K through 16, which means it's kindergarten or pre-kindergarten all the way through 12th grade and then beyond into our community college and then into our four-year universities. And beyond that, we're working with a lot of non-traditional occupations as well in those educational sectors. So to see everyone from such a broad variety of fields in the conversation around SURF and specifically within the HRTC, I just wanted to kind of share my enthusiasm about that. One of the things that is happening because of the K-16 grant that was acquired in 2022 is all of those partners I just mentioned have received funding. And the beauty of that is everyone in education is at the table with anybody within industry, whether that be a private or a public partner in the business field, a nonprofit, an intermediary. And we're really excited to start collaborating, I guess, more specifically around attaching students from all of those education systems to the workforce and build these pipelines together. So I just wanted to make sure we keep collaborating as we figure out the mode of communication. We will be having a K-16 meeting every quarter. Our next one is on May 16th, and it is specifically for those people who received funding in this K-16 grant, but the communication is going to be open beyond that. And we may be holding separate meetings about education connections. And so we would love, Jesse would love to hear from you about if you want to see maybe another type of meeting with somebody who is not part of K-16, but still wants to engage in the conversation to become part of that work and to kind of build those connections more aggressively. So that was just a little bit from me, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned it. I will try and speak every time so that we're inviting always and being inclusive of every voice at the table who wants to partner with anyone along the education spectrum. And I am personally taking responsibility for making sure I connect anyone in education with anyone in business through this venue that I can. So thanks for giving me some time.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Make sure you do one more and then go into the research deep dive since we're short on time. What do you recommend?
I mean, I think let's do a couple more.
Okay.
I think we're probably going to end up focusing the research deep dive primarily on the questions that people have for Dr. Kleinhens, because I think some of those are really critical. The questions being raised by Austin and Anna, but I do want to make sure that we get some more voices in on the process itself. And we've gotten some really great feedback here, and I think we're going to have to course correct a little bit. And look at some of those best practices so that these meetings, do have that inclusive feel. It's hard to do online, y'all, but there are people that have done it better, and we'll take a cue from them.
Then we'll do Anna, and then we'll do Paul. So Anna, I think you're on.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to go ahead and talk about a little bit about the research as well. So going back to the presentation, when we think of disinvested communities, the undocumented community comes to mind. Therefore, I want to ask if the numbers mentioned in this presentation also represents and consider that undocumented community. If not, I think it would be very cool to add how the undocumented community has contributed to the Orange County economy and how these numbers might not represent that population when it comes to their way of living. How much money do they invest in housing or other resources, and how could we also add them to this process and work towards having the undocumented community reach also a stable economy. So I think that would be very cool.
Thank you. And then Paul. Paul, you're on.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Paul Kaguya. First of all, Micah and Jesse, I know this is very difficult. We have more than 100 people perhaps on the call, and trying to kind of get everybody included in a 1 hour or 90-minute session is difficult. So I want to acknowledge the work that you're doing, and thank you for experimenting and taking the feedback. One thought I had was, we meet every 2 weeks. I know others meet in between. I wonder if there's ways in which you can keep us engaged and discussing maybe whatever we hear today's session for the next 1 or 2 weeks, we kind of engage offline. I don't know if there is I don't want to say Facebook, but if there's some sort of network where people can kind of ask these questions and answer and debate it at their own kind of leisure over the period of a week or two. And again, I don't know offhand if there are tools other than like a Facebook or a Twitter, but obviously I don't think we want to do that. But yeah, please do think about that. I think it'll be very, very helpful if these 1 hour sessions are more of a check-in as opposed to, there's no way you'll be able to answer all the questions and all the insights
Right.
that come about. So something to think about. But
Yeah.
again, thank you. I mean, you guys are doing a great job so far. So
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I think you make a critical point, which is that there's only so much you can do in an hour or even an hour and a half. And the team from OCBC is constantly having conversations with people from this group. And I think that it's an interesting question of what is there a technology for us to have a forum in which we're interacting on a more regular basis as a group. Versus having to have even longer meetings or have even more sort of one-off conversations. So we'll take a look at that as well.
So sorry, you're on.
Thank you all. I also want to acknowledge just the complexity of having these meetings and support what Anna has been saying. I think we do need to critically think about how we're going to be onboarding these impacted communities that we want to participate in the process and figure out what are some of the processes that are going to be available to make their participation more effective. So that's one item. The other item too that I want to just highlight is I think from the presentation and the discussion, it's pretty clear to me that addressing just one particular issue such as wages may not be the best strategy for the work that we are trying to do. I think there's a lot of intersectionality with issues that are impacting these lower income communities. One that really was pointed out in the discussion today was housing, obviously. And when I think about housing, there are studies out there by the National Low Income Housing Coalition, for example, that map out what are the hourly wages that need to be earned in different communities to be able to afford the typical rents. And for Orange County, it's over $46 an hour. So I know that we have to increase wages, have better jobs, but it may be impractical also to address the hourly wage required for somebody to be able to live in Orange County just on wages alone. We have to actually look at other impacts. How do we provide more affordable housing? How do we lower the housing cost? And then one other observation, also being part of the discussion, is in the data that was shown today, I would suspect that there's a lot of data that we don't have information for, and those individuals who are not hired by traditional methods, who do not have traditional jobs that are reported in our housing analysis and our housing data. And I know that it may be impractical, impossible to get all that information, but we do need to think about ways to capture some of that data. And hopefully we're going to be doing that through some of the survey work and other things that we're thinking about. But I want to just put that out there, part-time jobs or cash jobs and other jobs that usually are the typical jobs in communities that are impacted are not going to be reflected in this data. And how do we think about that and capture some of that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually, since we're at 9:40, I want to turn this over, or I want to get Dr. Kleinhans to answer some of these questions that have been kind of coming up again and again, because I think that would be useful for this conversation. So, because I know you've thought about this a lot, and we're showing some of the high level numbers here, but let's start with the question of job quality, which isn't just a measure of how much a particular job makes, whether that job is unionized, but also, is this a sustainable job? Is this a resilient job? And so on. So, maybe you could talk a little bit about, kind of that one level deeper on how we should think about the jobs in Orange County and some of the resources that would be there for us as we develop these economic plans.
My turn to talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all of these are very important. For some of these considerations, we have various data sources that help to inform quality of jobs, the level of engagement, things like that. So those are the characteristics of the jobs themselves. Sustainability of jobs, we have looked at various data sources to see what we can do to flesh out that particular aspect. Part of that is tied to the industries themselves, and a number of the industries that make up the Orange County economy probably do have long-term sustainability. But that's something that we, and I apologize, I was given 25 minutes to talk, barely scratched the surface in terms of the data that we have collected to date. But felt as though the first thing to do was to give a high-level view of the economy, the demographics and the workforce, and many, as I indicated in the chat, many of the concerns and questions that were raised, we'll be doing a deeper dive in the final report to bring some of that detail to the surface.
And then, it was acknowledged this might not be possible, but, there is this broader informal economy. And I have seen some studies of that, right? And, whether, that's not kind of reported in the general statistics. What have you seen that are some best practices for, incorporating those, kind of elements of the informal economy into these broader analyses?
Some of the, to the extent that individuals are picked up and their information is picked up in surveys that are commonly used. So with that, I refer to the American Community Survey, which we've begun to do our data mining on that. When we pull out data on wages by occupation, that would include anybody regardless of their work relationship or their work situation. And also with respect to the labor force data, this also, at least theoretically, includes anybody who's in the labor force, and regardless of their work arrangement, whether they're gig workers or undocumented workers, those kinds of data sources already pick up that information in principle. Just a question of whether or not these particular groups are participating in that survey effort. So we can certainly look for additional data sources to get a better read on each of those categories of workers, and see if we can build upon the traditional data sources that we use.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really important piece of information for folks, which is that actually a lot of these things are captured in the data that we're presenting. We don't know 100, I mean, these data are necessarily fairly high level, but they are not excluded from these data sources. That's really helpful.
Yeah, so culling them out is a different issue. That's where we have to perhaps turn to additional data sources. And, I know that to some degree they're out there. They just weren't a part of our first pass, which is what I'm reporting on here.
Great. Do we want to go to another question, Jesse?
Wait, so question, Dr. Klein, so we're past the people's general comments, or do you want to pivot? So more the Q&A. Yeah. Yes. Well, then we can go to kind of Michael in the Q&A. So would it be possible to have this research data on wealth and wealth gap in Orange County by race and how it has changed over time?
So it's a lot easier to get information on income as opposed to wealth at the county level. Maybe Wallace knows about some data sources that have wealth at the county level. I'll have to look into that particular aspect. Certainly, one measure of wealth could be the degree to which people are homeowners or not, because that's a primary source of wealth among most households. That's not the case for the households that are in the highest income categories. It's just one of many sources of wealth for those. households. But we should at a minimum be able to come up with some type of distribution of wealth. We certainly have a distribution of income already in our data.
Yeah, we would be happy if you could point us to that source, if you're familiar with that. That'd be great. We will research it. Point us there.
It's tricky. I mean, without
Yeah.
going, like wealth is a very complicated thing to measure. It turns out, but we'll look at some of those data sources. And there's just another comment in the chat on AI, and that is, we had the presentation at our last meeting showing how some of the jobs are vulnerable, and so I think a lot of what people are looking for is kind of that crosswalking, right? Of this is kind of the amount of jobs, the amount of output that these different industries produce, and then how do we crosswalk that with the contribution to the overall well-being of people in Orange County, the climate sustainability, et cetera. And I know that our full reports will be looking at these things from all these different lenses, in part because the state requires us to do it. Yeah, and then also, Dr. Kleinhens, a number of people asked, and I wanted to put the question directly to you around what do you believe accounts for, from the data, Orange County being this net importer of workers, right? So
Sure.
You could think about it being a couple of different factors, cost of living, educational attainment, et cetera. What do you see as being some of the key factors there?
Sure. Well, let's start with the observation that when you look at all of Southern California, there is a significant flow of workers from one community to another. So if I were to just say pick Irvine and took a look at the share of workers who reside in Irvine and work in Irvine, I bet it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 or 30%. So that means somewhere around 70 or so percent of workers leave Irvine, and another significant percentage come to Irvine for work. So that's the way it is when you've got this large metropolitan area where people tend to be, they tend to change their place of work more frequently than they change their place of residence. So having cross-county commuting is not uncommon. So the mix of jobs that we have in Orange County to some degree is an attractor for individuals who live in one county and work in another county. If you take a look at, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but if you take a look at Orange County's economy going back over the last 50 years, it went from, or 60 years, it went from being more or less a bedroom community in the 50s and 60s. By the time of the 1970s and 80s, it was a significant economic powerhouse. That is to say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% or so of the jobs that were in the county were held by county residents. People did not have to go, say, to LA County in order to find work. And so that's just continued to this day. And now it's a magnet for workers who come from the Inland Empire. So Riverside and San Bernardino County, people have an opportunity who live out there for whatever reason. Maybe they want to have a larger home, but they can find a better paying job in one of the coastal counties, including Orange County. So these are individual decisions that households are making in order to, satisfy their income decisions or choices and so on. And you've got a number of industries that are high profile and relatively successful in Orange County that make for good magnets for workers who are coming from these other areas. So it's not a cut and dried answer. I apologize, but that's kind of the world in which we live.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Jesse, if it's okay, Anna and some others have raised questions about sort of the root causes of inequality. There are a lot of different, ones for that, but I know that we were looking to get Candace and Alex in to do a little presentation on COVID recovery. Their work has spoken very directly to the sort of mapping and looking at the factors that influence disinvested economies. I wondered if this would be an appropriate time to have them speak to a little bit of that ongoing work.
Yes, I would just say then for people who still have pending things, we'll definitely pull everything from the Q&A, we'll pull everything from the chat, and you can kind of email me, and then we will obviously get those to the researchers right away if they have the answer right away, or if it's a comment about exploring further, we will do that as well. So
Great.
let's see if we can.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Robert.
Brian on and Candace. I think you've just been asked to be panelist, so you can accept. So Candace, yeah, if you wanted to start it off, Candace, I'm gonna see if Alex in here as well. Candace, is Alex also present, or are you primarily delivering this?
It's just Candace today,
Okay.
Jesse.
Sounds good. Candace is up and running.
And I don't know if you're muted on your side. I don't believe you're muted on our side.
All right, hello, can everyone hear me now?
There we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
sometimes my headphones do what they want to do. All right, so we have 9 minutes, so I will keep it brief. So for this week's presentation, as was mentioned, we are looking at COVID indicator. Well, I think it was mentioned at least. We're looking at COVID indicators, the impacts of COVID and indicators for COVID in Orange County. So Alex has put together a dashboard for this week. Alex is out of the office today, so I'll be carrying the presentation myself. First and foremost, I want to bring your attention to where the instructions are. When you open the dashboard, the instructions will be open here, and then after a period of time, as you can see, it closes to the left. So if you want to read how to navigate the dashboard or the summary, just click this little arrow and the explainer will pop open, as well as the expanded information about the maps themselves. Because of the time constraints, I'm going to not read through that, but just wanted to point out that's where that is. So in this dashboard, there are 2 different maps. The first map in the left-hand pane looks at COVID-19 totals in cases and in deaths. So there's 2 tabs here that will show you 2 different map layers for this first map. In order to navigate the map, you will just need to click this button right here and then click on the outlined zip code area of preference. So as usual, the darker the color, the higher the cases of, in this instance for this layer, the higher the cases of COVID-19. So when you click on a section, I've clicked on in Santa Ana, zip code 92704, you will notice that the numbers to the far left change depending on what zip code you're looking at. So in the zip code 92704 to date, there have been 24,000 cases and 262 deaths in that zip code alone. If we click over to the deaths tab here, the map will switch over and only show you the number of deaths in Orange County at the zip code level. And so once again, similarly, I'll click on a different area. I'll click on a lighter pink area. Oops, you have to re-click this little button. Click on an area, and now we're looking at zip code 92603, where there were 7.9 thousand total cases and only 146 deaths. So these 2 layers allow you to toggle between cases and deaths at a spatialized view of the county at the zip code level. However, and the far left-hand pane shows you the totals for both at all times. So it'll show you the totals of wherever you have specifically clicked. Now, on the right-hand side, we're looking at COVID, what we call COVID vital conditions. And these are areas of focus that will be heavy, that are at a higher rate of heavy impact for an unexpected disaster such as COVID-19. It can also be any other sort of disaster that may hit. And in this case, COVID is the most recent one that we've been facing. So similar instructions, you always have to click this button. For this map is actually at the census tract level. So if I zoom into a section, I'll try to still click in Santa Ana. You will see the numbers at the bottom of the page in the bottom pane shift depending on what census tract we're looking at. So here in South Santa Ana, this is census tract 741.03. their overall risk rank is a 5, right? So that's the highest level risk rank. And then you can see what the score is that Alex has developed. The categories that we're looking at for these counties of impact are economic, education, housing, environment, and neighborhood. So in this county, they're faring the worst in housing and in education, as well as economically. And so you can navigate, like I said, by census tract or by zip code. When I first saw this dashboard, my first question to Alex was, why aren't these the same? Why aren't they all both by census tract? And that's because the data on deaths and cases is not available by census tract. So we've added the city labels so that you kind of know the general area. And then since everyone on the HRTC board is entrenched in Orange County communities, we figured you'd be able to bridge the gap. So that is the dashboard for vital conditions on COVID-19 cases.
Great, and I think the point is that our research team, and you've heard different members of it present today, have data not just on things like jobs, but things even like community resilience and impacts of the COVID pandemic and all that. And so that is going to be a big part of our turning these research presentations into the the deliverable that will inform the strategies. So we have maybe time for one more question, Jesse.
Sure. So I think it says Carla, but it might be Luis. So I don't know if it's Carla or Luis.
Yeah, this is Luis.
Okay.
All right.
For some reason, when I sign in, it switches my name over to Carla. I'm not sure why that happens, but Carla is our membership organizer, who's currently on sabbatical. But I just wanted to make a connection between some of the comments that I've heard so far. And well, first, lift up some of the points that Anna was making and a few others have made about how, we're making the space more inclusive. I can definitely appreciate, all the work that everyone's doing. And at the same time, I think that the sentiment that a lot of us are trying to communicate is that if our initiative, if the SURF initiative, doesn't recognize some important shifts that are happening in Orange County, especially with regard to addressing historic inequality, addressing racial inequality, and a lot of other types of inequality that exist in our county, then we're not going to be successful in this initiative. And the connection I want to make is also with a lot of the brothers and sisters from unions who in this space have made the point of how worker organizing and unions, are the difference between a poorly paying job and a better paying job. The same can be said at the community level. And I think the importance of community organizations and community organizing, and the difference that will make when we're talking about the distribution of public resources. So I guess this is just an invitation, and this has been said before, for us to connect with the community organizations, and the people doing the organizing work that have really lifted up the voices and the power of communities of color and low-income communities here in Orange County. So just that, I think that the work to be done, in the SURF process does have to do with connecting more with those community organizations, and having those voices lead the design of what questions need to be asked, what questions need to be addressed in our research, and what type of strategies we're going to use to address inequality in our county. So just kind of a broad comment, I guess, and hopefully we can work along those lines.
Great.
in the coming
Actually,
months.
Luis, I think that does a great job of summing up what our intention is here, and we greatly appreciate the involvement and engagement of everybody on the call today. Got a lot of feedback that we're going to work on incorporating. I mean, I will say, having been involved in economic development processes for over 25 years, this is a fundamentally different thing that we're trying to do here. So there is no roadmap, there is no real example of this having been done right. We're trying to get it right. It was a very aspirational piece of public policy that we designed, every meeting, every engagement, we're looking to increase that inclusivity and center what we're doing on the needs of the disinvested communities and really center their voices and perspectives. Normally a process like this would have begun months ago with a presentation like what Dr. Kleinhens did today. And although those data are extraordinarily important, they're just one piece and type of data and set of voices. There's the whole community engagement process that we're launching into that many of you are leading. There's the incorporation of community voices more directly in helping to set our priorities. But we're doing a new thing here, and so greatly appreciate the patience and the grace that has been extended to us as we try to steward this process going forward. All right, well, thanks everybody, and looking forward to connecting. Our next HRTC meeting is in a couple of weeks on Friday, May 26th. Thank you so much to the presenters, and talk to everybody soon.